Good morning, my friends. Welcome to the 10-minute book talk where my friends Rachel Linden, wave Rachel, there she is. It's a little early here yet. And Katherine Reay and me, Marie Bostwick, talk all things bookish with you for 10 short and sweet minutes. Oh, do we have a treat for you today? And we're really lucky because the amazing Susan Meissner is super busy. She is so busy. I mean, really, she makes me look like a slacker. I'm a little jealous. So hold up your beautiful book, but she also just released another book, When We Had Wings, and she has another book coming out, Only the Beautiful, which we are just super excited to talk about, but it's always best from the author. So Susan, tell us a little bit, welcome A, and B, tell us a little bit about your book.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you guys. I'm really happy to be here this morning. So this book takes place during the early part of the 20th century, and it features a movement in our history that you don't hear much about anymore. It's the eugenics movement. It was a really bad idea. It was terribly unfair, horrible to execute. And the idea began here of improving the gene pool by wanting good people to have children and keeping people the people in power thought were inferior from having children. So there were all kinds of sterilizations going on in our country without people's knowledge, all at state institutions, all in the name of race betterment. They actually called it race betterment. And that kind of ideology is exactly what Adolf Hitler took and ran with. And we all know how far he took it. He took it to its worst zenith with the final solution. So it's about two women impacted by that movement, a young woman here in California, where I'm from, and she's living on a vineyard in a very idyllic location, but things aren't idyllic for her. She's young, she's unmarried, she's pregnant, she's an orphan, and she has a sensory anomaly called synesthesia, which we can talk about if we have time. But all of that makes it difficult for her to be unnoticed in this time. And then her story is dovetailed with someone else who figures into her life later in her life. And this woman is an expat living in occupied Vienna, right at the beginning of the Nazi regime. And the first thing that Adolf Hitler did before he erected any of those awful camps was he rounded up disabled children. And I hate to say it, but he killed them. He outright killed them. And so this woman is a nanny to a disabled child. So these two stories are going to dovetail because they're all about this idea of making the perfect human race, which is a terrible, terrible idea. And we all have intrinsic value from the get-go. And there's no way to make us more valuable. We are wonderfully, amazingly creatures, humans, and there's just no way to improve on who we already are. And yet people tried to disastrous results. So that book comes out in April 18, Only the Beautiful. And the cover, I can't help but keep showing it to you. The cover is just gorgeous.
It is.
And what I like about it is it has the floral border, which suggests beautiful, but the tobacco sky should cue you in that there's something wrong with only the beautiful. When you put the word only in there, that's a qualifier. And that should tell you that there's something wrong with that sentence. So I'm really excited for it to come out. It's gotten 2-star reviews so far, which is always nice to get that kind of affirmation from the trade.
Very nice.
Really,
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very relieved and glad that that so far the critics seem to like what I've done with this story.
Good.
Well,
Susan, I feel like you find these fascinating pieces of history. I loved the last one. I loved the nature of fragile things with the San Francisco earthquake, which was a totally new thing to me, even though I'm on the West Coast. And so with this, again, I mean, I knew about the eugenics movement, but I think I've read one book in my entire life that touched on it. How in the world did you come across this, and how did you decide to write a book about it?
Yeah, I stumbled across it like some of my ideas come to me when I'm looking for something else. And what it was is I wrote the book about the San Francisco earthquake, the nature of fragile things. And I had this little bit when I would present about the book about 9 years later, San Francisco hosted the World's Fair. So they recovered from this massive catastrophic event, and they had this beautiful exhibition in 1915. And I was looking at pictures of that exhibition, and there was an exhibit for race betterment for the eugenics movement. They had a huge exhibit wanting people to come in and see how wonderful it was to try and improve the human gene pool. And I thought, what in the world is that? Because I really didn't know much about it. It was a term I had heard about, but never looked into. And when I looked into it, I realized, this is probably something we ought not to forget. because we tend to repeat the things that we forget, and we don't want to repeat this disaster. The thinking is already actually still among us. It's still with us. The action, thank goodness, is not so much, although there are still pockets where you have it happening. So I don't want things that have happened in our past to be forgotten if they should be remembered.
Mhm. I was going to ask you about some of the surprising things you found during your research. I have to say, I think it'd be more like what didn't surprise you, because everything probably surprised you, but you do such an amazing job of taking these issues and making them so personal. So what sort of aspect in the research surprising, or what did you really hone in on to make this a very personal story? Because that is a hallmark of your books.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wanted the book not to be terrible all the way through, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to sugarcoat anything. I write historical fiction that I hope people feel like they can trust me, that what I tell them happened, even in a fictive world, really happened. And so I couldn't withhold the truth, but I wanted it to be hopeful. And so even though I wasn't surprised after I read everything, I was surprised from the get-go of what I read. But once I learned the truth and realized this is what I have to work with, I did want there to be hope at the end. So I've crafted an ending that I think people will find hopeful, because even though there are some really bad ideas and people that have what I would call malicious and evil intent, there are still good people in the world, and they're everywhere. And they don't always get the light shown on them like they should, but they're there, and they were there even during this dark time. There were people that thought this is a terrible idea. And so I feel like if I could bring that home, that yes, there's darkness, but there's always light too, so that we're not left without hope.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
important.
Powerful.
Very.
I was so struck because, not doing the shameless plug, but my next book, Esme Cahill Fails Spectacularly, has a character with synesthesia. So like all my brainwaves, lit up when I saw this, and I found some of the same things. Now my character actually, like, she thinks this is not a deficit. She thinks it's like an extra level of perception that other people don't have, and she feels good about it, but she also knows that she needs to hide it because people just don't get it. So talking a little bit about synesthesia, I know we could probably talk all day about it, but like using that and some of those themes, like what are some of the things that resonate, even though both of your book, my book, these are set in a different time period. What are some of these things that you think are really going to resonate with today's readers? You've talked about some of it, but I think you've got more.
Yeah, I think with synesthesia, which is a sensory anomaly in which the senses kind of get tangled in the person's brain. The receptors are a little bit different than yours and mine. So some synesthetes will hear a sound and see colors in their head, in their periphery. And that's what my character has. It's the most common form of synesthesia. So she'll hear a doorbell and she'll see flashes of orange, or she'll hear a rooster crow and see blue spheres or something like that. In the 1920s, that was not understood at all. It was seen as something not good, abnormal, should be eradicated. And so, of course, for someone like my character to be caught in this web of they're wanting to have a perfect gene pool, that is not perfect. It's rather imperfect. And that causes trouble for her. And so that, I think, the reason why it will resonate with today's readers is because we still tend to fear what we don't understand. It was not understood. And so people feared it. And I think that's something that carries through the generations. And it's probably one of our faults that we tend to fear what we don't understand, because oftentimes what we don't understand is something wonderful.
Yeah.
But we don't understand it. And so we dread it. And then we just perpetuate that fear by imposing that fear on the rest of society. So you have people working out of fear, telling other people you need to fear this, and they just jump on the fear wagon, and no one spends the time to actually find out, well, what is it really? And if we did, I think we would probably we would not bring so much heartache into the world.
Boy, powerful book, powerful messages.
Can you hold
Well,
it up?
you said one other thing that I thought was true. You're like, I always want to leave people in a place of hope. We too always wish to leave people in a place of hope here at the 10-minute book talk. So we're going to ask you what we ask all of our guests. Sue Meissner, what is bringing you joy today?
Oh, today it's my new home. I used to live in Southwest California, and now I live in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm practically in Canada, and it's so beautiful here. It's peaceful and wonderful and pastoral, very conducive to the creative mind. I don't care that it rains here. In fact, I really love it. It's what makes the ferns so ferny. And so I'm very pleased, and I'm glad we made this huge transition. So I would say it's really wonderful to be in a setting that brings me joy just by being what it is.
That's fantastic. Well, welcome home.
Yeah, welcome home. And Rachel and I aren't that far from you, so we're going to have a get together.
Yeah.
Hold up your book one more time, friends. Like, run, don't walk to your bookstore, your computer, wherever you get your books, and get a copy of Sue Meissner's newest, Only the Beautiful. You won't regret it. And you know what else you won't regret? Tuning in to us every week here at the 10-minute book talk.
Every Wednesday.
We'll see you next time, guys.